So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We were talking backstage, and Jon had the idea of just starting with a short 1 to 2 minute meditation. And I thought, no, we don't want to start with meditation. It always messes everything up. And I thought, actually, maybe we'll try and start with a short meditation. So Jon, would you like to invite us into that?
I was hoping that we could get Yuval to guide the meditation. Because, you know, meditation's a way to invite yourself to drop underneath your thinking. And then he even abandoned the deranged notion that your thinking is yours. So it's merely phenomena that's arising and passing away in the mind, but we take it very seriously. And it's a superpower. But I would say that human awareness is another superpower that, I hate to use this verb, but trumps the superpower of thought, and that is human awareness. That gets not enough airtime or understanding in our common lives. But I'm guessing that some of you at least understand what I'm pointing to. So let's just take a moment or two and actually realize in awareness, in the body, that you've arrived. And so with meditative awareness, one thing you'll notice is I could have formally rung some bells and then ring some bells and say the meditation's over, but from the perspective of true Dharma practice, there's no beginning and there's no end to the meditation practice. It's coextensive with life itself, in the same way that as long as you're breathing, the breath is coextensive with life itself. And it would be very helpful most of the time to actually be embodied in the present moment, because it's the only one we ever have. And yet we're always out there looking for something else. So,
Wonderful.
This entire conversation will be part of, in some sense you might say, a meditation of some subset of humanity on what the hell is going on and what our chances are, because we are so brilliant that we've managed to create these kind of conditions that are actually putting the analog world that itself is the result of 13.8 billion years of evolution since the reputed Big Bang. And we're an intimate part of that, and really, I would say, there's a profound genius that accompanies that, an analog genius that I think will be a resource for us as we move into this other domain of AI and other kinds of machine intelligences that you've just so beautifully and eloquently written about in such remarkable detail in the book Nexus that's out there. And it's just, as with all your books, it's a staggering accomplishment, and I bow to you for it, and really also appreciate the gift of it, because it's like an alarm bell, a wake-up call, and that's very consistent with the meditation practices. Like, maybe this is time for humanity to wake up, but easy to say, but how we actually navigate that pathway between democracy and totalitarianism and all sorts of other things, and just endless, useless, stupid wars. This is kind of the curriculum of the moment, so I don't think there could be a more perfect time for your book to come out and for you to be here with us. So welcome.
Thank you. And I think it's very good to start with silence, because I think that in many cases that the truth is kind of protected, or it's beyond our reach, because there is a shield of silence, and some people would say boredom around it. Like, I go and meet, these kind of very powerful people, the tycoons, the politicians. And one problem always is that they're very busy people, so they don't have time for silence. Like, you meet this extremely, extremely busy person, and he or she has just, like 10 minutes, half an hour to talk with you. So in that time, like you feel that if I don't say the most interesting thing right now, the person will just walk to the... Why would he spend or she waste their time on me if I'm not saying something extremely important? And what you find out is that when you constantly try to say only extremely important thing, you never say anything really important. That you go through life and it's just always in the shallows. You never have time to go deep. And to go deep, silence and boredom are essential. If you have a conversation and you try to talk about something and it turns out it's not so important, and then it's something else and you just raise this thought, you're likely to get to someplace really important. But if you are constantly on the edge, I must say you just talk in slogans. And
and you don't even know who's doing the talking because a lot of it's automatic pilot.
Yeah, you have in your brain this, I stored from previous conversations, TV appearances, I stored this kind of a few stories and lines that I know they are effective, people think this is important, and then I just press the play, and it comes out.
Now, with boredom, since you brought up boredom, it's like when we train people in meditation practice within the context of mindfulness-based stress reduction and medicine, of course, boredom comes up almost immediately, and also pain. And one of the things that people learn very, very quickly is that, paradoxically, if you turn towards the boredom and investigate it or put the welcome mat out for it and just observe boredom, actually it's very interesting to observe boredom. And the boredom, it's like touching a soap bubble. It evaporates, it goes away because the interest arises. And it turns out that paradoxically the same thing is true for pain, that when a lot of people fall through the cracks of the healthcare system and there is no way to take their pain away, and the opioid epidemic is like a reflection of that, both emotional and physical pain. But when you turn towards and open to the raw sensation, then we can ask interesting questions like, is your awareness of the pain in pain, or is your awareness of suffering suffering? And people will almost immediately say, no, when I'm in awareness, there's the sensation, but not the suffering. Well, that's a liberative or insightful moment in a certain way. And perhaps this has larger implications for the kinds of, people that you're talking to who don't have any time or are instantly bored or just speaking automatically, because mindfulness is kind of like, it's not anything other than human awareness. And human awareness is not something you have to get, it's something you're actually born with. And the problem is access, access to awareness. So from the point of view of AI, now human cognition has reached the point with the technology where it's created other ways of accessing reality in a certain way, and how we're relating to that is a huge challenge because of the speed at which it's unfolding and
I think
potential
there's
to lose it.
Just to jump, I think what you had said, Yuval, about almost like where the words are coming from. And there's a power of the words, but there's also a power in where in my being those words are coming from. Are they coming from kind of a place of presence and ease and of service, or are they coming because I want to impress everybody or I want to show everybody? So the same words might be said, but they might have a different kind of energy or intention behind them, and that intention's often felt. And I think the challenge we have today is because the information's happening so fast, even when somebody hears something quite profound, let's say on social media, they're just on to the next, the next thing so fast that the wisdom and compassion and teaching sometimes don't always get downloaded into them, and the algorithm is trying to keep them going. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about how you see that dance.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what you said about the difference between analog and digital, or between organic and inorganic. That organic beings like ourselves, like other animals, we work by cycles, and sometimes we are on and sometimes we are off. And we need time to rest and to digest and to sleep.
Right.
And algorithms are not like that.
Yeah.
AIs, computers are always on. They don't need these cycles, and they don't need to sleep and to rest. And as they become more and more dominant in the world, that more and more of the basic kind of networks and systems of the world are being manned and run by AIs. You know, if you think about the AI apocalypse, it's not the Hollywood scenario of this one big supercomputer that tries to take over the world and destroy humans. It's more like millions and billions of AI bureaucrats that are increasingly making decisions all around us, in social media, in banks, in armies, in governments, and they are really inherently alien intelligences. I take AI as an acronym for alien intelligence and not artificial intelligence. Alien, not in the sense that coming from outer space, but in the sense that it's really alien. It's very different. It's not organic. And again, one of the key things that it's always on.
Yeah. I think you give the example of, you know, in the programming, let's say the algorithm on YouTube, you just tell it, reinforce, enhance user engagement. And it has its own ways of doing that. There's not a human necessarily telling it, put this ad here, put that ad there. Is that an example of the system?
Exactly. Again, I mean, it's still human beings who run the big social media companies like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. But the day-to-day management, the decisions about what to show you, what to recommend to you, it's increasingly done by algorithms.
Yeah.
And the humans give them this kind of general goal, like increase user engagement. But then the algorithms experiment and discovered, for instance, that if you want to increase user engagement, and engagement sounds something nice.
Yeah.
Be engaged. What's wrong with being engaged with the world? Well, there is something wrong, could be, with being too much engaged with the world, because the algorithms experimented on us and discovered something. It's not really a big discovery because people knew it thousands of years ago, but the algorithms also discovered it, that the easiest way to get somebody engaged, to grab your attention, is to press the hate button or the fear button or the greed button in your mind, and then you're engaged. So this is why they flood the social media platforms with more and more content that presses these buttons, and people become glued to the screens. And this is not good for us.
And the
On
humans
so many-
behind it say we're not responsible for that, when in fact they are responsible for that. I mean, it led to Myanmar and also the sort of colossal catastrophes in Brazil by that, you know, just maximize user engagement without anybody taking responsibility on the human side for what those downstream effects were.
Yeah, I mean, they constantly try to shift the blame to the humans now,
Right.
and they say, you know, it's the users.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a human user who created this hate-filled video, some conspiracy theory. What do you want from us? Do you want us to censor them and violate freedom of speech of a human being? And the answer is no, we don't want you to censor human beings. We just want you to take responsibility for what your algorithms are doing. If a human being decided to put on Facebook or YouTube some hate-filled conspiracy theory, that's their responsibility. And I agree that you should be very careful before you censor a human being. But that's not the problem. The problem is that then your algorithm decided to deliberately
Amplify
show
it.
and recommend this specific. There are so many videos on YouTube. Why did your algorithm choose to show this video and not some video on some boring sermon on compassion instead of a hate-filled conspiracy theory? Because this is more engaging. Okay, I understand the business model, but then you can't blame the users for the decisions and actions of your algorithms. This is the heart of the issue. And again, when it comes to engagement, this is something that I learned in like my first meditation course 24 years ago about engagement. It's very easy to engage the mind with certain types of content. They gave me this instruction, okay, just sit there with your eyes closed and focus all your attention on the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. Don't try to control the breath, don't do anything, just feel, is the breath coming in into the breath going out? Now, this was not particularly engaging. As far as user engagement goes, very, very low marks. And then the algorithms in the mind, they immediately found these videos from my past, which are far more engaging, and started showing me all these angry videos and all these lustful videos, which are very engaging, and I lost complete touch with the reality of the present moment. I mean, the whole point of the exercise, it's very easy to engage the mind. It's very, very difficult to engage the mind with reality.
Yeah.
And that's the crucial difference. If they told the algorithms, don't maximize user engagement, maximize user engagement with reality, let me see that happens on YouTube.
I think there's two parts to this. There's two parts, right, if I jump in. One part would be how do we engage the mind with reality? And then the second part is how do we shine the light of consciousness back on that user, right? Because let's say I spend my day just focused on reading facts and reading truth. It doesn't necessarily relieve suffering, right? I think the Buddha said, I here to teach one thing and one thing only to relieve suffering. And so I do think that there's a truth element of knowing what's true, but then there's also this inner journey of what consciousness is. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, or do you feel like I'm off on the wrong track with that?
No, I mean, especially in the age of AI, the question of consciousness becomes more important than ever, because you have all this big question of whether AIs will become conscious and what will happen then. And I think it's still the biggest riddle in science also. What is consciousness and where does it come from?
And can humans be conscious, more conscious?
Can humans be more conscious? To what extent are animals conscious? To what extent computers can be conscious? And there are so many definitions of what is consciousness. And the definition that I found most helpful is that consciousness is the capacity to suffer, which immediately means that it has also an ethical value. That, to destroy a chair, to burn a chair is not an ethical issue because the chair can't suffer. But when you harm an animal, a sentient being, this is an ethical issue because it can suffer. And there are so many political discussions which revolve around that. For instance, the whole discussion of abortion. It's not the only issue, but a very central issue. Are fetuses conscious? Can they suffer or not? Are they ethical subjects in their own right or not? The same with animal rights. Can cows suffer? Can chicken suffer? Can fish suffer? And so forth. So once an entity has the capacity to suffer, it enters the ethical realm. It becomes an ethical subject. And the really fascinating thing about it is, but when you think what actually suffering is, and then one way to understand suffering is that suffering is the rejection of reality. That you feel pain, and the pain is not the suffering. Right. The pain is just a sensation. It's made up of all these tiny waves of heat and tension and pressure and so forth. And the suffering comes when the mind feels this sensation and says, I want it not to be. There is something in reality, something that exists right now, and the mind says, I want it not to be. I want it out of existence. And, it goes all the way from pain to entire wars. I look at what is happening in my homeland right now, with the war in Gaza, with the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and it's basically millions of people saying, we want these other people not to be. There is something in reality, and the mind reacts, even though it's here, I want it not to be. And the deep question is, what kind of thing is it in the universe that can reject reality. That it's here, and the mind says, yes, but I want it not to be here. And again, this goes to the heart of the question about AIs and computers, and because they are so, mathematical entities, everything based on calculations and so forth, is there a mathematical calculation that results in a rejection of reality? Like you think about thermostats that measure the temperature in the room, which are taken as a very kind of simple machine, because you can tell a thermostat if the room goes under, say, it goes up over 30 degrees Celsius, turn on the air condition so the temperature goes down to 25. So the thermostat is interacting with the world. It takes actions in the world. But as far as we know, it's not conscious and it's not suffering. When the temperature goes over 30 degrees, the thermostat doesn't feel, this shouldn't be.
Right.
It has a program, okay, it's now over 30 degrees. I have this program that says switch on the air condition. It does so. But it doesn't reject reality, which is why it's not a crime to take a thermostat and throw it in a boiling water. Because there is no rejection there. And this goes all the way to the algorithms that manage social media and the next generation of AI. And the question is, can AI reject reality in the way that we do, and in this sense, suffer?
Not yet, but jump in here, Jon.
And also potentially cause enormous amounts of suffering as well.
Causing, absolutely. That's we already know. They can cause an enormous amount of suffering. Again, we've seen it like the AIs that have been running our social media platforms for the last 10 years or so. They are very, very primitive AIs, and yet they had such a huge impact on the world, for the better as well as for the worse. I mean, I don't want to just focus on the bad side. There are also enormously positive things that social media has done for humanity.
If you look at teenage mental health in the US, and you look at the statistics of the last 5 years, user time on Instagram in particular and TikTok, and their quality of their mental health, I think it's very hard to say it's had a more
It's an epidemic that even the Surgeon General is intervened to create some kind of
we can't say for sure, but the data suggests that the more time and their sense of self, and here's how I see it, just to throw it in. I see it as like, particularly teenagers and particularly teenage girls, they're looking for a sense of belonging and connection. And if you go into a forest and you see all these trees, you experience the trees, you experience the forest, like, oh, I'm connected to these forests, right? If all of a sudden I went into that forest and every tree had a number on it, this is a 10, this is a 2, this is a 3, my experience of that forest would be very different, right? Because everything now is in this world of comparison. So young people go on these platforms and all of a sudden they're numbered, they're rated, and everything they see is rated. And of course they're feeling separation. They're feeling disconnected from their spiritual self because all of a sudden they have a number and a connection and they're above or below. Their friend got this number of likes, they got this number of likes. And so I think what they're longing for is this sense of being in a forest and being connected. And what often they experience is a sense of separation, of being other, of being higher or lower. And so, my hope would be to create a new social media company that maybe reinforce the goodness in young people. But I think there's that desire to feel a sense of belonging. And I don't know if the rating system that is created, to me, it doesn't necessarily help create that sense of separation.
And just to bring it back to the meditation practice, people can learn how to belong without any devices. In the analog world, you learn how to be okay. And then you see that your mind is producing all sorts of things that say you're not okay, you're not pretty enough, you're not this enough, which is what is being exploited by all the algorithms where you can actually change the way you look on certain kind of, programs and so forth. And it's saying, how about we not give up our analog beauty just yet? And be conscious of how much we are, in fact, surrendering it when we interface with any of that technology, and create new kind of educational pathways to self-recognition and learning how to live an embodied analog life and not be a slave to never mind AIs. I mean, just the phone itself, even if it's not driven by AI. You walk down the street in New York City, and I did this morning. I walked for like 15 blocks, and virtually everybody is looking like this. Now, 40 years ago, if people were walking down the street looking like this, paddy wagons would have driven up and taken them to the local hospital because this is patently insane back in the day. But now it's become the default mode that everybody is on their phone. And there's a sense of profound connectedness that's very beautiful in a certain way, but there's a toxic element to it when you are, in some sense, lose touch with your own analog integrity. And also the trustworthiness of your multiple intelligences, of which thinking and emoting are merely two of a much bigger range. So part of, I think, the challenge going forward, and I'd like to ask how you see this, is how to educate ourselves and future generations to not be so quick to give up who they are. Even though, ultimately we may not know who we are, but the not knowing is an incredibly precious dimensionality of humanity that's creative, loving, mysterious, and also in a very profound way ethical when it's taught. As you know, the meditation practices are taught within a context of ethics, of non-harming, of not taking intoxicants, of very purposefully not stealing and taking what's not yours. So the question is, the word dharma, which is this kind of overall framework for the Buddhist meditation practices, it actually means lawfulness. And lawfulness has something to do with governance and how we govern ourselves. So as we move into this insane future, from this insane present, are there ways that we can actually learn how to govern ourselves in our analog lives and interface with the digital and the AI in ways that really optimize well-being and minimize all of those different kinds of harm?
I think that it reminds me, I once met one of the people, of the engineers, who came up with the like button.
We know
Justin, probably, right? Yeah. Well, we can name him a little. He doesn't mind.
And I think to some extent regrets this big invention. It's the amazing thing about the like button of Facebook, such a huge invention in the world. They basically rediscovered the beginning of conscious life. Because, in sentient beings, at least ones who are not enlightened, who are not Buddhas, so you have awareness, but then you have reaction, you have judgment. Mm-hmm. You're aware of something, and you say, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it. Yep. And this is basically what they discovered in a digital form. Yeah. That this urge, like I'm aware of something online, and I like it, I don't like it. Why? I mean, we've been struggling basically for billions of years to deal with this organic bug in our mind, this constant I like it, I don't like it. And then they start this new inorganic digital evolutionary process, and the first thing they do, they repeat the mistake of let's build into the foundations of the digital system this I like it, I don't like it function.
Yeah. And if he hadn't done it, somebody else would have.
Yeah, of course, I don't.
No, it's not. It's like inevitable that, we're constantly kind of judging ourselves in terms of like how good my experience is.
Yeah.
And that's true in the meditative domain too. It's like, how enlightened are you?
The meditators can get very competitive.
Well, exactly. Exactly. I mean, nobody's immune to this kind of thing. But the challenge is now, like, how do you either disconnect the like button, so to speak, in your own mind?
This is meditation. Meditation is disconnecting the like button.
because it has to do with, sort of like dopamine. I mean, it's like just a complete dopamine fix, that it feels good. And then you count how many people like you. never mind liking what you like. How many people liked what I posted? And then you're dead.
Well, this is what you've met very famous people, as I have, powerful people. And one of the things you notice is how insecure people often are in terms of whatever level of financial or whatever status. Often there's a sense of insecurity because that might either be lost or I don't really know who I am. And as I look at this world, I'm wondering how we support, particularly our younger generation, in knowing who they are so that these gadgets or the things, they're like toys. They're not like their self. And I think one of the biggest challenges all of a sudden is that I think that's me, right? Like that profile or that post is me versus like I know who I am and that's just a tool that I'm using or not using. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and so is there a way that we can cultivate, and maybe it's through meditation practice, but is there a way that we can cultivate in ourselves and in young people a sense of knowing who we are independent of whatever the external world tells us?
This is being aware of reality without being too quick to judge it, to like it or to dislike it, to want it to disappear or to want it to increase. And this image of the people going with the smartphone, with the screen, this is basically going back to the Greek myth of Narcissus, which is set on and
it's a mirror.
This is Narcissus. And you have images,
Narcissus,
even
yeah.
from ancient Greece, depicting Narcissus like that. And like we have then the whole world going into that mode.
Yeah.
And to be, and the impact on mental health, like one very important or very interesting research I've seen recently is comparing the mental health of different professions. And the profession that came at the very bottom, the very, very bottom of mental health was politicians.
Shocking.
Which is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Because we need these people to have good mental health.
Yeah.
It's a very important profession.
Yeah.
And we are making it almost impossible for healthy, sane people who want well-being in life to be in that profession. Yeah. And there are many reasons for that, but one reason is, again, that you need to be constantly on.
Yeah.
There is never a single moment that you can be off.
Yeah.
That because the news cycle is always on, there is always something that is happening. And again, it goes back to the no moment of silence because everything is so important. Mm-hmm. There was just now this story in the UK about whether the Prime Minister should go on the summer vacation with his family or not. Mm-hmm. And obviously he should, right. But he's so important and there are so many important things happening in the world. So some people say, no, he should be on all the time, which is humanly impossible. Yeah. And it happens, of course, not just to politicians, but to everybody. Yeah. If you think about teenagers in school, so previously status competition was something that happened only some times of the day. Mm-hmm. Like you go to school, you go to the schoolyard, there is status competition. Then you go home, you shut the door, and that's it. You have some time off from status competition. Now, status competition is always on. At any moment, something can happen, I can say something, somebody can say something, which has an impact on my status. And
talking about online.
Yeah. And similarly, it's like life becomes this very long, never-ending job interview. That anything you do at any moment has an impact on your chances of getting a job 5, 10, 20 years to the future. Yeah. Like you did something stupid but legal in some college party when you're 18, 20 years down the line, when you want to be a judge or you are a politician or you're a journalist, this comes out.
The algorithms find it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no longer any kind of private moment. Mm-hmm. And part of what we know also from meditation is that the mind is full of garbage and junk and stupidity. And we need space for that.
Yeah. Is that why you meditate 2 hours a day?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much garbage inside. And, when you go and you speak on a stage in front of people, you have a big responsibility. You have to be very careful about what you say because your words are like seeds that go into the minds of lots of people. And if you say something hateful, then you encourage hate in the minds of many other people. And especially politicians, like you say something on television, millions of people hear it, it goes in their mind. You're like spreading hate in the world.
Yeah.
But in
so you
this
have to be
moment, let me
extremely
just stop
careful.
you. You're doing the exact opposite right now in this moment. We all are taking responsibility for the exact opposite of that. And it's not just the people in this room, but there are also the live stream, and it's like nothing ever like disappears anymore. It just migrates to YouTube.
So we have to be extremely careful.
But it's also what my point is that it's also a certain kind of a transmission or a reminder or a recognition to whoever is watching, listening, that you're more than you think you are. You're greater than your thoughts, and you're greater than the kind of seductions that we're all so easily susceptible to. That if you shut off your phone or shut off your devices or didn't interface with ChatGPT, that it's not like you're less than. You are completely whole as you are. And when you start to integrate that using, yoga, meditation, sports, any kind of engaged, body-grounded process that reminds you of your analog, mysterious wholeness, then could that not be a kind of antidote in the domain of mental health and medicine for the kinds of interfaces that we inevitably have to have with the digital world and with AI? I think that, and the Surgeon General is promoting that, just in terms of the loneliness epidemic, that everybody's connected and everybody's lonelier than can be and have very low self-esteem. And these meditative practices, if I scan the horizon of like global history, not being a historian, but I don't see much except for the Dharma in its most universal dimensionality, but that comes mostly and was most articulated in the Buddhist tradition. Is that possibly a kind of resource that we could tap for our analog being going forward that might actually find some kind of dynamic equilibrium with what we are facing with this, what's called the coming waves of, AI on top of AI on top of AI in the next 20, 30 years or something like that. And because you dedicated your first book, Sapiens, we were talking about this backstage, but I read it on a train in China on my phone when it came out.
You were one of those people looking at your phone
I
on the
was
train,
looking,
and other people
never
were judging
read a
you.
book on my phone before or after, but Sapiens really captured me, and there I had it, and it's dedicated to S.N. Goenka. And I happen to know who S.N. Goenka was. He's a great lay meditation teacher from Myanmar, but who lived in India, and who played a huge role in Buddhist meditation coming to America, because many of the Buddhist meditation teachers now in the Vipassana tradition here actually sat long retreats. And I have a friend from the Harvard Medical School who came back in 1973 and told me about this 2-week retreat that he sat with Goenka, and it transformed his life, and him just telling me that transformed my life in a certain way.
Wow.
You mean that's possible? You could sit for 2 weeks and watch your own mind? And this was before there were phones or any kind of digital distraction. And so my question is, and I don't want to be romantic about it or like this is the kind of thing that's going to save humanity or anything like that, but I think we're sitting on top of, as I was suggesting before, a superpower in human awareness, and especially when it is embodied and non-dual in the sense of I'm not striving for some ideal that I fabricate in my own mind of enlightenment or wakefulness or anything like that, but what I'm looking for is already here. I am already it in some sense. Is that not one of the few ways that humanity might actually thread this needle for the next 20 or 30 years? the improbability that mindfulness would spread in the world, I mean, it's like millions and millions of people are now practicing in a very serious way. How many of you, if you don't mind my asking, how many of you have a fairly regular, let's say,
We won't
meditation practice? Look
Or we'll
at
be
that.
aware of our
If we
judgment.
did that 40 years ago, the answer would be 0, and nobody'd be sitting here anyway. So something is happening, and the question is, can that also be amplified? Not necessarily digitally, although we're happy to do it, online as well, but so that the wisdom that's intrinsic to humanity, that's not Buddhist, that's not Christian, that's not Islamic, that's human, has a chance to actually be the equal of the cleverness of the people who are actually creating the algorithms that are actually now creating themselves.
A wisdom renaissance.
That's in some sense my question. And could that lead in some sense, because AI is not all potentially bad, could that lead to a certain kind of renaissance that would actually put the renaissance of the 16th and 17th century into the shade in a certain way, in the arts, in music, in theater, in everything else, and the people, and it's happening. We're here in New York City. I mean, that is happening. Is there a way to understand it in a more global perspective that actually would inspire people to realize their own beauty and their own full dimensionality of intelligence?
No, I think that like AI, our minds are also nowhere near their full potential. There is still so much to explore and develop there. And if humanity indeed, if for every dollar and minute that we spend on developing AI, we also spend another dollar and minute on developing our own minds, we'll be okay. But it's a big question mark whether we'll do it, because it's much harder. And one of the things, again, that I learned from meditation is that if you give the mind two things to do, one easy, one difficult, it always goes for the easy one. So, you see it in the development of spiritual traditions, that if it includes an element of, let's say, bodily, sagfanut, how do you say in English? Like you fast, like you fasting. And another element of developing this ability to focus on the present moment, people will shift to fasting because it's easier. They think that torturing the body with fasting and all these kind of things is very difficult. It's actually very easy. If I tell you, or I tell anybody, if you manage not to eat for 24 hours, I'll give you $1 million. Anybody can do it. Yeah. And even if it's a bit difficult, I'm a bit hungry, they can do it. If I tell you, okay, now more difficult, you have to sit in a lotus position for 1 hour without moving, so much of pain, I give you $1 million, people will do it. It will be very difficult, it will be hard, they'll force themselves, they do it. If I now tell you, okay, you now have to focus for 1 minute only on your breath, without wandering to any thought, to any memory, without any judgment, I give you $1 million, most people are unable to do it. Because this is the really, really difficult stuff. That we can't just give ourselves a command. We have command of our mouth, we can force ourselves not to eat. We have command of our legs, we can force ourselves not to move our legs. We have no such command of our mind. And this is the difficult stuff, and what you see throughout human history in every religious and spiritual tradition, that you have this menu of the difficult stuff and the easy stuff, and people gravitate towards the easy, thinking it is the difficult. Like they would wage entire wars and crusades and inquisitions, thinking, oh, this is the hard stuff. And no, it's the easy stuff. Yeah. And the same thing happened with the development of technology. Again, $1 for developing our minds or for developing AI, it's much easier to code AI than to change our own minds. So we gravitate towards the easy stuff.
Is there a way we can start a renaissance for the hard stuff?
Oof, this is hard. Again, this is why I don't have this optimistic vision that the whole world will start meditating.
No.
I don't think it's going to happen. Even if it happens, it's very likely it will gravitate towards dangerous areas, because we have from history a lot of examples of civilizations with spiritual traditions that went in very harmful and dangerous directions. So there is no, because of these tendencies, there is never this kind of guarantee. We can try and incorporate, not the kind of specific, if you force people to all meditate 1 hour a day, it will be terrible. But to kind of incorporate some of the basic principles into, for instance, the technology. So a meditative principle incorporated into modern technology is give people time off for silence and for non-judgmental moments. I think that like a basic human rights now should be the right to stupidity. Like I mentioned earlier, that my mind...
I wouldn't call that stupidity, I'd call that wisdom.
It's a right to... my mind is full of stupid thoughts that I'm keeping to myself as much as I can and not sharing with you, but it's hard. It's hard not to share with you.
You want to try one?
No.
We want to hear.
I'm serious. It's really stupid thoughts. And then it's hard. The event is over.
You're talking about cat videos and things like that.
Worse things. And then it's over, and I'm going with my husband, and who is also my manager and the producer of this whole thing, and we go to the taxi to go back to our hotel. And then I can relax, and then I can let the stupid things out. And hopefully the driver or somebody there is not recording me on the smartphone and then posting it. And if we talked earlier about why politicians have such poor mental health level, it's because they don't have time to be stupid. So they do it in public.
So let me give you...
They need... because basically they confuse politics with therapy. You now have this kind of this model of the authentic politician.
Right.
You have the bad politician who have these media advisors who tell them what to say and what not to say, and they are not authentic and we don't like them. And then you have the authentic politician who says the first thing that comes in the mind.
Immigrants eating dogs, for example.
Instance,
for one possible scenario.
Here is a thought I would like to share with the American public.
Yeah.
And this is bad. We need to reverse it. Actually, politicians should not be authentic. They should be responsible. Keep your dog-eating thoughts to your therapy session.
Yeah. But can I sort of flip that a little bit, because I feel like it's very easy to get caught in judging your thoughts and actually projecting onto them how stupid they are. As I understand the invitation of the meditation practice, it's not to judge the thoughts at all, but to just or build stories around the stories and thoughts, but to simply let them come and go, and then you're already free from them. They're like clouds moving in the sky.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think of meditation as this space when you can just let the thought be without judging.
But then, why can't that be carried into all aspects of life? Like when you see your husband, or when you see a child, or when you see your boss, or when you see a politician, that you are aware of all of the different emotional and cognitive elements of it, but your awareness is not being captured by them in a certain way, so that you maintain a certain kind of potential clarity.
With my husband, I have this. So I can say whatever I want, and I know that most of the time it won't be judged.
Right.
And then it can just be there. But again, when I have a public appearance, then, this is not the place to now kind of let everything out, because it has consequences in the world. This is why we have meditation centers. And we don't teach meditation usually in the middle of a noisy street in New York. Now, ideally, like the ultimate ideal is to meditate in the New York busy street.
Exactly, but you got to go away to learn how to do it.
The process of getting there, it passes through these ashrams in India. until you get to the real meditation center on the street in New York.
Except that may not actually be true. It may be a big idealization that, people who often claim to have some kind of profound insight, the problem isn't the profound insight, it's the somebody who's claiming to have it. And that is a very big potential problem. So what I'm hoping we're pointing to or talking about the potential of is recognizing in our very selves, without privileging ourselves in any way, that the insane beauty of having a life or being embodied for a period of time between birth and death, and to a first approximation, an infinite number of moments between those two endpoints, that we could actually inhabit in ways that maximized ethical behavior and recognition of beauty and non-harming, and minimizing the impulse to hurt, to run, to fear, and that in the recognition is the freedom. It's not like you have to eradicate it. And then the question is, in some sense, are those algorithms that are running inside of us too? Or can we shift the I don't know what to call them, but whatever is driving human emotion and human thought and so forth, which is like a lot based on experience and how one was parented and culture and everything else. Is there a way to actually transform the culture? So we've transformed the culture so that everybody's walking down the street like this, but is there a way to actually transform the culture so that people have it in their back pocket or their purse or something, and they're walking down the street and they're actually making eye contact, they're looking at each other without predation, without I need something from them, but more like hey, the delight of that. I've experienced that in certain places in different cultures where people just kind of open, but I think it's disappearing very, very rapidly.
I had a friend who, it was Mahasi Sayadaw is a different lineage within the Ubakin school, and he had a short audience with him many, many years ago, and he said, so what's the essence of the practice? Yes, Mahasi. Mahasi Sayadaw, supposedly this is the story of this person, said, know your mind. And he came and said, why? Why know your mind? And he said, for the benefit of all sentient beings, know your mind. And I've always loved that answer because it talks about a personal responsibility, but it also talks about what you said, which is the impact of not knowing our minds. And I think if there's any kind of renaissance potential that we can support, it would be this renaissance of knowing your mind so you can understand, I like to use the word heart, but people could use different words, compassion. It's very hard to have compassion when you don't know your mind. It's very hard to have love when you don't know your mind. And so the Renaissance, if there is one to emerge, I think would be something in which people were encouraged to really know their mind, not from a judgmental place, but actually know their mind in a way that allowed more love and compassion to come true love and compassion. And to me, the AI is going to happen regardless of my views on it, and I can't really help too much. I can do a few things. But is there ways that we can support this other movement in society? And possibly writing books is very, very helpful. But I think part of the critiques people have sometimes of maybe Yuval and all of us here is like, well, tell us what we need to do. like, what is the path? Okay, you're in charge. What is the path? And I'm wondering if you all have kind of some thoughts about, okay, if the path forward, knowing AI is going to do what AI does, how do we begin to identify or support a vision that we feel like is embodied the best of humanity?
I don't think there is like a one-size-fits-all answer. So it's every individual needs to identify what, going back to this big idea that we need to get to know our own mind for the benefit of all sentient beings, but how do you get to know your own mind? So for me, I practice Vipassana meditation. Yeah. But I know from my practice and from interacting with other practitioners that maybe it's not the ideal way for all people. I've seen many, when I just began practicing, I became like this missionary. Everybody must go. And after some years, I've just, from empirical observation, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Nothing works. So, okay, find out what works for you, and then whatever it is. It can be a different tradition of meditation. It can be therapy. it can be art, it can be sport, it can be going to the woods for a period, whatever works for you, and then invest in it.
Yeah.
And as much as you invest in it, you get back. There are no shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
No.
You said invest in it. When you said that, I heard you say investigate it,
Oh.
which would also work.
That also works. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, if there is a practice which is so important to you, it's also important to investigate it. But as much as you would give it, this is much you'll get from it. And it is, in many ways, the most important thing you can give yourself.
Yeah.
And you've
in the
said
world.
that in your books. At the last chapter of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, you spoke about your own meditation practice. I was very touched by that. And the amount of time that you actually devote to it is like, if I understood it correctly, is like you're meditating several hours every day.
2 hours a day.
2 hours a day. Most people don't do that. Even meditators don't necessarily meditate 2 hours a day unless they're on a retreat. So this is really, I think, exemplary in a certain way, that you know your own mind enough to write these incredible books that really, I think, clarify for a lot of us what is going on and the history of it, and the sort of detail in such a way that it really affords us an education in possibilities because of understanding danger in the past.
But for me, it's almost a survival question, because I don't think I would be able to function
If you weren't,
without it. Certainly, I would not be able to write these books, so I wouldn't have the problem in the first place, without the clarity of mind that the meditation provides. But then to deal with the consequences, like to be in these public events. So again, it's really, what really creates, it's a lot of stress.
well, sorry to put you on the spot.
No.
You
but-
are a sweetheart, and
but
we're really
I'll
happy to have you here.
It's not your natural intention would be, let's go in front of an audience. Right?
No,
Like left your
I
own,
like,
yeah.
people who like my family and my friends that know me from days before. I could, like when I had to kind of pick up the phone and talk with somebody, like in the in the municipality, the water department. Like there is the water is some problem. So I would sit in front of the telephone for like minutes, just gathering the courage to speak with a strange person, like on the other side of the phone.
Well, I want to just say that in this environment, and I don't know any of these people necessarily.
You know some of them.
I can hardly see them. I know some of them. But the point is, wouldn't you say that you are at home? You are welcome here? I mean, I feel like, wouldn't you agree that, that like there's no need to be uncomfortable in the ways that you're describing. You can be as much as you want, but there's no
The need is from inside. I mean,
I get it.
Objectively, there is never any need.
But so that comes, so I want to ask.
Problem,
Go ahead.
the problem, is always the ego, the like button. Like, would they like me or not?
But that's,
Oh,
okay,
can we all agree though? We really
No. That's,
can we drill
now,
down on this for a
when
second?
they clap and I have this
That's
pleasant
more pressure.
sensation, this means that next time when they don't clap,
yeah.
and when there are all these kind of
Boy,
all these
Yeah.
hateful things on
I'm the-
social media.
you're a
then-
heavy-duty case.
I'm the same.
Okay, can I point something out? Okay, in terms of the like button and so forth. The Buddha is famous for having said at one point in the Bahia Sutra, it's called, that all of his teachings could be encapsulated in one sentence. And I like to say, on the off chance that he wasn't kidding around, maybe we should, memorize that sentence. And the sentence is, apropos of what you just said about I, nothing is to be clung to as I, me, and mine. And the operative verb, of course, is to cling, to self-identify, to attach in that way. And the awareness, the antidote to that, and the sort of the Four Noble Truths, the antidote to that is non-clinging, is recognition. And the recognition actually liberates that sort of thought-based, mistaken real identification, so to speak. So the identification. Now, your first book is called Sapiens. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but from my biology, I sort of remember that the species and the genus are both sapiens, so that we're Homo sapiens sapiens. Is that fair?
I mean, there is the
Okay,
discussion.
I like to play with it, so at least I'm not entirely wrong. So, and the word sapere from the Latin means to taste or to know, and to know in a direct experiencing way. So if you want to know what a banana is and you've never eaten a banana, you don't go to the Encyclopedia of Bananas, you take a bite, okay? Mm-hmm. And so we're the species that knows that we know, not in the sense of cognition and metacognition, but that kind of awareness and meta-awareness. And now the neuroscientists are actually moving from cognition and metacognition to understanding that it's much bigger than that. And awareness, as you were saying, big mystery to neuroscientists, like how you generate awareness out of 3 pounds of, trillions of neurons in the head, trillions of synaptic connections, billions of neurons in the head. No one has the slightest idea how to. So if you're worried that you're not a genius, it's just a waste of time, because it's patently obvious that every single one of us is a miracle. We have the most complex arrangement of matter in the known by us universe, and we get depressed, or we doubt ourselves and so forth. So the question is, can we develop a kind of education, so to speak, that might remind us of the species name that we were given by, Linnaeus, I guess, or by
our modesty.
by ourselves, and then possibly live our way into it. Because if you scan the horizon, that's what I was challenging you about or saying, there aren't that many things that I feel like are available to us that would go the distance to a potential liberation that would be for the planet itself. Like Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this book called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. I mean, aside from AI, we've got other planetary challenges, right? Big ones, like global warming. And there again, we've fallen into camps of liking, disliking, othering, and, with nuclear weapons. And is there a possibility from your historical perspective that we could wake up, actually, as a species, to the name we sort of gave ourselves, and live our way into it before it's too late?
Yeah, that's the big question.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the answer is. And on the individual level, there are answers. Mm-hmm. But the collective is a very different thing than the individual.
Yeah.
There are processes that happen when billions of people interact, which are really inherently different from the life of an individual, right, or of a few people. And part of the issue, and it goes back to the issue of stories, is that large numbers of people are always held together by stories. And part of what meditation does, meditation is kind of anti-story. Like you're sitting in the present moment trying just to observe what is happening without a story. Don't build a story around it. And the mind is a story factory. You sit for a few moments managing just to observe reality, and immediately the mind starts either bringing up some old story, some memory, or start, this is a wonderful meditation now, and I'm progressing, and soon and a story emerges. Right. And on the individual level, we have practice, like in the Dharma, of how not to constantly create stories. But when you think about entire countries and humanity at large, I mean, the story is the glue that holds everything together.
Need the story.
And the only thing that can replace one story is another story. Yeah. There is no way that we can have kind of a global system.
Well, how about the story of planet Earth, for instance? The story of, the word China, as I understand it, means the center. Chinese civilization, very, very old. They've been around a very, very long time. They have a Dharma history from the Tang and Song dynasties that's second to no expressions on the face of the earth. I mean, they're just phenomenally beautifully articulated, artistic, and in every other way, and true non-dual teaching. What if the Chinese actually woke up to that on a sort of bigger level? That would be interesting.
I think he's saying that from the individual level, we have some agency, but from the collective level,
No, but that's
2
what I'm
billion
talking
people
about.
in
It's
China is a hard...
actually going to a larger collective level. If we're so interconnected now, why can't we influence each other in just this kind of a way? The stakes are very high. Even, let's say, never mind AI, global warming. I mean, we need to kind of wake up to the fact that if we give the planet more of a fever, the consequences are going to be really horrible. What if we're not telling ourselves a big enough story, and that story would include the story of no story as well, so that it would be really non-dual, but it would be an engagement of all of us in a certain kind of collective belonging and meaning where we saw each other's humanity instantly or more right away, rather than you're a threat to me, and if I don't get you, you're going to get me.
I think part of the solution could be going down from the level of the mind to the level of the body, which is also, again, at least my basic experience with going to my first meditation course. I was doing my PhD in Oxford at the time,
Right.
living in my mind, and here was this person, Esen Goenka, telling me, stop living in your mind, go down to the level of the body, start with the breath.
Right.
And there is a lesson there, I think, globally, because what separates humans is the stories in their minds, whereas on the bodily level, we are remarkably the same.
Yeah.
And, there is I often like to quote Sting on that, the singer, in his song Russian, which is becoming more and more relevant with each passing day, that we share the same biology regardless of ideology.
Yeah.
The ideologies, the stories that the mind creates, this is what set us apart. When we go down to the level of the body, the biological level, we realize how much connection we have, not just with the other humans on the planet, but with the entire ecological system.
Exactly.
I'm going to
And-
see, I'm sorry,
No, no.
Yuval. Or just if somebody has a question, we'll just get to like 1 or 2, but there's a microphone here.
And again, there is this story in the Buddhist tradition about this meditator who came to Buddha for instruction, and he was a very, very accomplished meditator in the higher jhanas.
Mm-hmm.
And these higher jhanas are this extremely deep meditative state,
Concentrative state.
very, very concentrated, where the mind really loses all connection, the 4 highest jhanas with the body, and start expanding and expanding and expanding the mind to infinity. And like a cosmic mindfulness and the cosmic mind, and the Buddha tells him, go down back to the level, you've lost touch. You have lost touch.
Right.
And in a way, this development of AI
Yeah.
also it harps on the same fear that we are creating a universe of intelligence in a way, which loses touch with with the biological and even with the physical level. And this is, again, one of the biggest fears, is that this is what AI will be. This kind of it will expand. It starts for planet Earth. Humans like us, all these dreams of conquering other planets and other galaxies, it really can't be done because our minds can easily go to outer space, but our bodies can't. We evolved for billions of years on this specific planet. We are adapted to this atmosphere, to this gravity, to this sun. Taking humans to Mars, living on Mars, then on Jupiter, then on other solar systems, almost can't be done. But for AIs, very easy. So we could face a situation when you have this AI civilization spreading,
populates the universe.
Yeah.
But losing all touch with what really matters.
Yeah, there's a quote that I'll let Suzuki Roshi, who's a Zen teacher, he said, what's the most important thing? I got this from John in his book. What's the most important thing? And his answer, the most important thing is remembering what's the most important thing. and it's a very likelihood that we're going to forget the most important thing. Go ahead. Cool. So she asked about money and networks and organizations and impacting networks.
So very briefly, I think that if you want to make a change in the world, you have to cooperate with other people, which means either joining or starting an organization. 50 people working together as part of a community, of an organization, can make a much, much bigger difference in the world than 500 isolated individuals, each trying to do just my thing. So there are many, of course, challenges, because organizations are made of people, and each one is also bringing their own issues and problems into it. But if you really want to make a change in the world, organizations is the way to go.
We're going to get to one more, and we'll see. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I mean, first, I don't advocate, I don't invite people to become gods. I'm pointing that we are on a trajectory of humanity pursuing this dream, which could be very, very harmful, of trying to turn ourselves into gods. And yes, the seed mythologies are extremely powerful. You plant a seed, there are consequences. We've been dreaming about gods so much for thousands of years that now that we are so powerful, and people think, okay, what will we do with all that power? Okay, let's become gods. So the myth come back to haunt us in this sense. It's not something I'm advocating. It's not something I'm for. So how do you get rid of such a powerful myth of any kind? Again, this is very, very difficult, because the myth is kind of woven into the entire world around us, even if we don't realize it. And meditation is a way to loosen its grip. It's a practice that lets just see what is really happening right now, and not allowing or encouraging the brain to just keep creating more and more stories and mythologies. If you just replace one story with another story, it can create even bigger problems than before. So, again, ideally, it's just to loosen the grip of the stories on us.
Thank you. So we're just about out of time. Final thoughts, words, John? Final thoughts, words, Yuval? Anything that we did not touch or that you want to name? That
I have this thought moving through my mind, and the thought is saying the story of no story. Not sure exactly what it means, but I'm sort of just wondering whether there's a story that's big enough for this moment that we could all, in some sense, connect with, that recognizes our common humanity in a certain way, and also our common dilemmas in a certain way, that is ethical and that would recognize suffering and the causes of suffering and liberate them to whatever degree we can in our individual actions and in organizing communities and institutions that actually function effectively in those kinds of ways. So, when I read a lot of the stuff about the AI, I worry about the world that my grandchildren will be growing up in, and what they would even need to navigate that world or survive that world in a certain way. And I keep coming back to the analog. I kind of trust in something about this, as I said, 13.8 billion years of evolution, where, our very blood, the hemoglobin, that heme is a fourfold porphyrin ring that has an iron atom in the middle of it, which comes from exploding supernova long before there was a solar system here. That's inside every one of our blood cells. The green outside in the trees is chlorophyll, which has the same porphyrin ring. It just evolved the same porphyrin rings, but billions of years earlier than animal life, and so before hemoglobin. And it has a magnesium atom at the center of that ring. And that's how we capture the sunlight from our star to give life to the planet Earth. So we are remarkable, miraculous beings in every way, shape, and form. And just the fact that we can wag our tongues, move the air, and our ears decode it, and you can follow this sentence, and I don't know where it's going to lead, and everybody else can follow it too. This is a kind of genius, a kind of remarkable capacity that we all have. And if we could learn, I think, through your analyses of history and of these information networks that go back in what you were talking about, the sort of the printing press, and then what happened with the witches and all of that, that everything has unforeseen consequences. And is there a way that we can kind of take something that we know to be, in some sense, liberative and help liberate ourselves in the ways that I think we are kind of in agreement really need to happen to some degree or other, sooner rather than later, that there's a certain degree of urgency, even if we're just talking about global warming without talking about war and, sort of everything else and AI.
Thank you.
So that would be
Yuval,
my
do you have any
final
final thoughts as we close this
Yeah, I think
section?
about the issue of a new story or the story of no story. So again, the simplest recommendation would be to try and go down to the level of the body. Because the minds in different places and are supercharged by the algorithms and the AIs, they are taking us in extremely different directions and creating more and more disunity.
Right.
And to stay together, the place to go is to go to the body. And thinking about the atoms in the blood and the iron and the magnesium, it's interesting to think that each of our bodies is made of atoms from all over the world. And from basically, statistically speaking, I think it's that from almost all the people who lived in the past.
Yeah.
Like statistically speaking, because we constantly breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, atoms, that there is a very high probability that each one of us in this room has a few atoms in our body which were once part of Buddha's body.
Wow.
But also that were once part of Hitler's body.
Yeah. And Nehru and
and everybody.
Yeah.
Because, just statistically, you throw all these atoms, you mix the atmosphere, you take back in, something comes. And the atoms have no memory. Unlike humans who go around carrying the history of the religion of their people on their back, the atoms are free. Like they don't care if they were once part of the mustache of Hitler or they were once part of the foot of Buddha. An oxygen atom is an oxygen atom, doing whatever they do. And with regard to no story, no story is silence, which is where we began.
which is wakeful, which is awareness.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Our time is up. Thank you, Yuval. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure. I hope you had I learned a lot, and I will go away with this feeling. I still use your children's book, The Unstoppable Us, that there's a power of humanity, and there's also a danger of humanity, and we're kind of coming up to this precipice that might lean one way or lean another way, and I can't control which way we lean. But it's just an honor to be here with the two of you and exploring how consciousness potentially might rise and might expand to meet the challenges of its time. And I'm excited.
And thank you, Soren, and the whole team here of Wisdom 2.0 for catalyzing and tending this conversation.
Yeah, so thank you.
And thank all of you as well. Thank you.